With me talking about, a lot of the melting girls, shape-shifting girls, liquid girls kind of stuff over the past couple of weeks, if not a couple of years, who knows. Especially also highlighting and recommending people like Joven16, Mr. Internet Man, Trouble TRO, SM's Fantasy, Ant-Zorsen or AZ. A lot of people like Grape Hythenia, Prender, all of them. Minor dash alterations. When I've talked about these, I've seemed to notice some kind of a trend going on. Now, the videos where I talk about them, they may not get many views at first, or even the audio versions that I put onto the podcast, because yes, I do convert some of these and upload them onto my podcast, which you can find in various podcast locations like Amazon Music, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, Player.fm, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, you name it. Except for Pandora, I'm still working on that. But still, you can find it there. And the fact that, getting back on point here, the fact that when I also upload the audio versions of these discussions there, people do flock to them. Maybe not as much, as they would on YouTube, but they still flock to them. And what's crazy about it is that over time, even through YouTube, the videos do grow. They go from, being in the 20s to the 30s to the 40s, 50s to being in the hundreds, if not more so. And it really makes you kind of think about it and kind of makes it almost obvious that there seems to be a huge fan base for this. There seems to be a huge fan base for this. Seems to be like a huge community. And I know I've talked about this before various times, but it's still surprising to know that there is a huge fan base for this. And true, it's not on the levels of, the news is going to talk about it, or the news is going to talk about it, or entertainment media is going to talk about it, and stuff like that. But still, it's out there. It's out there, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see. And again, as I've mentioned before, I think the reason that when you compare both male and female characters with these abilities, even if they're just a one-time deal and they go back to normal afterwards, or it's a permanent situation, when you compare the two, like I said, people are more fans, they're more driven towards the female character that has these powers. Like I said, even if it's just a one-time deal or it's a permanent deal, they're attracted and driven more towards the female character than the male. And the reason being, as I've said before as well, is, on numerous occasions that is that the female, from historical and urban legend standpoints, is more mischievous, more creative, more imaginative, and they could utilize that to do whatever they want with these powers. And what's funny is most of the time that a female character is given shape-shifting, melty, liquidy powers or whatever, all depending on the writer, one of the things they like doing, because it gives them a quote-unquote good feeling, is they like to melt into a puddle and remain that way for a little bit. And what's crazy is, you at first would think, that's kind of weird, that's kind of stupid, that's kind of gross. But no, somehow writers, either just regular written work or comic work or whatever, they find a way to make it a feel-good situation for the female character that has these powers. And again, it's not just that either. It's also the fact that, as I mentioned before, if not recently, a couple of days ago, it's also the fact that sometimes when a female has these powers, even a male, because there's males that have done that too, but, it seems that when these characters have these powers, these shape-shifting powers, that one of the things they like to do, or one of the first things they like to do, depending on the story, whether it's in the middle, the beginning, or the end, mostly at the end, or building towards it anyway, is they like to split themselves into multiple bodies and make out with themselves. Yeah. That you heard me right. One of the things that some people build towards, depending on how they do it in the story, is the female, or is the female and even male character, because there are some that people have done the same thing with. They like to divide themselves into multiple bodies, 2 or 3, maybe 4, and allow those clones, twins if you will, of themselves to make out with each other. And sometimes they allow those clones, twins of themselves, to have their own individual personalities, with the condition that they acknowledge and realize where they came from. And again, that's one of the things that I think really drives people to want to, be fans of this kind of genre, to have a fan base, to have a community dedicated to this. Mainly because of the fact that these are things that, as I said recently, when you read it, you as a reader, as a viewer, can only imagine, what it would be, can only imagine and think, man, what would it be like to have that power in real life? And again, like I said, and I say it with all due respect, no offense, between males and females, it's mostly the females that get put into this situation because of their, like I said, historic and urban legend point of view, because of their, mischievousness, their creativity, their imagination, being able to, come up with any kind of scenario. And like I said, 2 of the scenarios mostly writers come up with is either is making it feel good for them to melt down into a puddle and remain that way for a bit, or basically split themselves into multiple bodies and allow those multiple bodies to make out with each other. And if on top of that, give those multiple bodies, personalities of their own, with acknowledgement of where they came from. And when you really think about that, as I've said before, you're essentially having the character make out with themselves. Yeah, you essentially have the character make out with themselves, which is really, it's really crazy. But again, here's why I think that reasoning always comes into play. It comes into play because, there's always that, like I said before, there's always that old trope that gets used in stories, whether it's on television, on the big screen, books, whatever, where a character will look at themselves and be like, man, I wouldn't mind getting it on with myself. And again, mostly, and I say it with all due respect, no offense, it's mostly the females that are like that. So to me, that's where the idea of, okay, if a female has these powers, and she's always thought, man, it would be nice to make out for myself, and, because I look so good, now she has the ability to do so. And the males, like I said, are not to be left out either, because there's some characters that have that ability, that turn themselves into females, that split themselves into multiple females, make out with themselves, and there you go. It's weird. It's weird, but I think it's these kind of tropes, the making the melting down into a puddle feel good trope. It's the multiple, it's basically splitting themselves into multiple bodies, making out with themselves trope, with those multiple bodies having their own individual personalities. I think it's scenarios like this, it's tropes like this that get people attracted to these kind of stories because of the imaginative unlimitedness of the possibilities of what these powers could bring to the table if they were utilized in real life. Again, these stories make the imagination of the viewer, the reader, run wild and make them wonder, man, what would it be like if that was real? What if it would be like if that power was real? And you can't deny them thinking that. So yeah, it's just like I said, it's just amazing to see that this has a fan base, and a fan base that cannot be denied. You know, it's no wonder that we're getting a lot of stories on the big screen and the small screen with female characters gaining these powers, or female characters being the new leads, if you know what I mean. And it's all because that fan base, that community, it may not be big now or noticeable now, but over time it is going to grow. It is going to grow. And I think the reason it's gotten more noticeable is because of the fact that people have been indoors a lot lately, and now only being able to and now recently are getting back out and trying to get back to normal. But I think that kind of contributes to them becoming fans, and this community and this fan base growing to the heights that I don't think anybody would expect them to grow to. But what do you guys think? What do you think of this community, this fan base? Are you part of it? Are you a part of it? Do you like what you see, coming out of these stories? How do you feel overall? Comment down below, and I will talk to you all later.